Hi, and welcome to Deer IQ, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, 20-plus year educator, 30-plus year deer hunter, untastefully seasoned outdoor writer, and I'm here to help you achieve what we all hope for, to be truly greater deer hunters. We're in the series, To Be in a Deer's Head, dissecting the needs, motivations, and leveraging these to predict the whitetail future to really up our odds as hunters. Today we're with whitetail expert Doug Roberts, and we'll look at some very counterintuitive things that might leave you with your mouth wide open a bit. I know it did me. As we start, I want to challenge you to do a couple things. First, download our free journal to use with this podcast. That's really going to help. Second, as you use that, here are the top look-fors or things to look for during this episode. What has Doug learned about generational learning of deer and passing down knowledge? How can we train deer with our presence instead of negatively pressuring them? And you've heard of dog years, so how is whitetail age and stage of life really comparable to a human's and helps us understand them so much more? And I have a challenge at the end that I believe will truly take your hunting skills up several notches, so make sure to stay tuned and listen for that. And now let's get to the podcast and up your deer IQ. Okay, I'm here with Doug Roberts of Conquest Scents and Conquest Deer Farms. Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, glad to be with you, Adam. Thanks for asking me to come on.
I've known Doug for many, many years, and the listeners may or may not know Doug. He's got quite a resume, and when I was looking at this segment, looking at what it means to get and be in a deer's head, which is really what a hunter should be trying to do to be successful, really understand their needs and motivations and how that should drive our hunting, right? I immediately thought of Doug because of his experience that I'd say supersedes even a person that's been hunting a very long time. But Doug, tell us a little bit about your background, and so people just kind of know where you're coming from as just, I guess, I'd say a deer expert.
Okay. Well, growing up as a kid, I worked on farms, and so farming was natural to me, and also hunted with my dad, whitetail hunting. He got me into it, and it's one of the things I fell in love with. And so basically 32 years ago, I put those two things together when I got into deer farming. And then I realized there's very many aspects of deer farming. There's deer farming, there's deer ranching, there's the genetic side, there's the scent collection side, there's the venison market. And just because I can't sit still, I got into all those different categories. And over 32 years of literally living with deer, you have no choice but to literally learn so much from them by just watching them on a daily basis. You see them in every environment, you see them in every habitat, you see them in every weather condition, you see them all 4 seasons long, from fawning to the rut period. So if anyone is in that situation and they're breathing, they have no choice but to learn a lot from the deer. So it's not that I knew a lot, it's being aware. You're a school teacher, I'm a school teacher. We're very aware of wanting to learn from what is in our surroundings. And my surroundings for 32 years has been whitetail deer.
Yeah, and you can't help but absorb that. And little background, I've known Doug for probably close to 20 years now. Went to church with Doug, played softball with Doug, and then found out about, he has a deer farm. That's kind of cool. And it, just kind of went from there. But just to give everybody perspective on what Doug just said, I just put down some numbers. These are averages, these are guesses, but I feel it's pretty conservative just to give a perspective. So Doug's experience, I went off 31 years, buddy, 32. Let's just say he spends 12 hours a day with deer, which is probably more than that. But I just figured that. And let's say 355 days a year, let's say he's gone on vacations and stuff a little bit, but I know he's worked really hard and is with them a ton. But this is just for figuring some math here. So in 1 year, that's 4,260 hours with and observing deer. After 30 some years of this, I calculate that's around 132,000 hours. Okay, now compare that to an average hunter. I looked up some numbers like how much do average hunters, how much time do they spend in the woods a year? Again, this is just an average, right? But let's say around 30 days a year at 3 hours per hunt. Some might be less, some might be more, but this is just an average. In 1 year, that's about 90 hours in the woods. And also during that time, you're not observing deer the whole time. It's not like you're living with them. You observe them a small amount of the time, but just giving the benefit of the doubt. That's 90 hours in 1 year. In 31 years, that's 2,790 hours. Okay, so the average hunter, it would take 47 years of hunting to equal 1 year of Doug's observations and knowledge, right? A whole lifetime, right? He gets basically in a year, right? And if you wanted to have the same thing that Doug has after this amount of time, it would take the average hunter 1,466 years. So as we talk to Doug, just keep that in mind that he's learned a ton just, again, by living with these deer. So that's the, I guess, perspective. So Doug, let's get into this here, and we're going to do several segments with Doug. But first of all, just generally speaking, so in your time with deer and all this, we get outsmarted a lot by deer. Hunters do. The question is, are deer really smarter than us? How are they different, and how is it that they went up outsmarting us so much? Like, if we could get in a deer's head, what would we notice is different? What might surprise us?
Well, first of all, deer aren't smarter than what we are. I mean, we're developing all kinds of things. We are definitely smarter than the deer. But what I think most hunters, including myself, and I'm going to include myself on all of this that I talk about, we lose focus of the simplicity, really, of life. Deer are very simple creatures. They care about three things: staying alive, finding food, and reproducing. And that's all they care about. And really, when you look at it, we're going into their world out into the woods. They know every tree, every branch, every rock. They know every wind current. They know their environment so well because they keep it very simplified. We, as people and hunters, seem to think that we need more and more and more and more and more gadgets. We need more things to outsmart. And it's really over amplifying what we're trying to do. If we just make it simple. Everyone knows, no matter what. I have a scent company. Listen, hunters, watch the wind currents. You have to. I mean, it's just a smart thing to do. Keep your clothes clean. Smart thing to do. The problem is the deer have learned to be aware of things above them now. So many hunters talk to me about, man, the deer come out and they look right up on my tree stand. Well, that tree stand's probably been there for 10, 12, 15, 20 years. And they know when there's something odd looking in there. Danger seems to be around. So we're training them more than they're training us. And they're learning our habits much better than we're learning their habits. That's kind of the issue we have right now with hunters.
I think that's interesting. And talk about maybe for a second some of these things you mentioned before on your farm, how we can even some of this stuff can be maybe generational learning. And like if there's let's say a tree stand or a spot that always is dangerous, that actually, yes, it can be observed by deer, but it can be taught and passed down to generations. Can you talk about that a little bit more? That's interesting to me.
Yeah, it absolutely is. When deer are born, like all other animals, they have no fear of humans or mostly other things. They're taught what to be fearful of. And even here on the farm, it's very interesting. After all these years, it's so amazing to watch fawns being born and the interaction of the mom with that fawn. When they're first born, the first 2-3 days, if you're out there, they'll come right up to you. They have no fear of me. I'm no danger. I'm no threat. I'm not hurting them. But if mom is there with them, she'll snort or she'll blow or she'll stomp her foot, and immediately that fawn drops to the ground. And now they're not only understanding that the look of me is dangerous, but the smell of me is dangerous, or the machine that I'm on, the noise is a danger. And within a few days, those fawns already know that if they hear, see, or smell those things, to just slowly lay down or quickly lay down and hide, because mom has said those things are fearful, those things are dangerous. Just like we as parents with our kids, there are certain things they don't know are dangerous, but we have to tell them, though, a hot stove is dangerous. The deer are the same way. It's a learned trait. It's a passed on trait. We talked about snorting and blowing. That's a learned trait. It's not genetically bred into them. And I can prove it because the deer on my farm, they don't blow very often. Now in the spring when they have fawns, I allow them to snort and blow. But any other time of the year, if I have a snorter or a blower, she gets called out of the herd or he gets called out of the herd immediately. And what we have found over the last 15, 20 years, we don't have deer that do that. They might stomp their foot, they might kind of get jittery, but very seldom will we ever hear a deer blow, because we've taken it out of the repertoire. We've eliminated that on this farm, and that helps keep everybody calmer. So how does that transpose to a hunter? Well, if you got a doe in that area that just is constantly coming in, causing a disruption and blowing and snorting and stomping, take her out of the equation. You're probably going to have to take the offspring out of the equation as well, because they've already learned the trait. But you can eliminate it in your area if you do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I would think also translates to kind of what you said earlier. This idea that we get stands in certain spots that we like, that we use habitually because hey, they're good spots, or they're where I shot this one years ago. But that can shift over time. We have to, I think, be real careful and honest and observe the deer and how their behaviors change based on my behaviors as well. And the idea of, maybe I should be moving my stands around a little more, or being careful not to overhunt certain spots, because if I'm hearing you right, that deer will associate those spots and start avoiding them, and that can be passed along to fawns, and they just learn to avoid certain areas on a property.
It absolutely is. A perfect example is this, where the area we have our 2-year-old bucks in currently, we have tree stands in there. So if there's an injury or we have to dart one of them, we can move them into certain areas in front of those stands and dart them. Just over the summer, those bucks, all of them will learn where those stands are at. And when we go to move them, by the end of the summer, when we go to move them, they're apprehensive to go to any of those corners, because they know they're pushing us, so something's not right. So when we go to actually move them up to the ranches, we have to move them to a whole new pen where we have tree stands set up in other areas that they're not familiar with. And then it's very easy to dart them very quickly and put them to sleep, because they haven't memorized where those stands are at. They don't know. The other thing that we find interesting is if I hop off the four-wheeler and I walk to a tree stand and climb up it, those deer actually watch me and can see me go there, and they will not go in that area. Whereas if I stand the four-wheeler and the four-wheeler goes to that tree stand and it just sits there and runs, and I will climb up the ladder, and then the four-wheeler leaves, they're in their mind, everybody is left, so that area is safe again, and yet I'm up in the stand. So they, in some sense, you can say they can count And it's not that they can count numerically like we can, but they can identify when two things split, one thing splits up into two different things and where they're at simultaneously.
Yeah, that's interesting. They can't really do the math, I guess. So if somebody drops you off, let's say to a tree stand, they think you've left, even though one of the people stayed behind. You'd have to have some sort of separation for them to figure out, oh, that's more than one person, basically, right?
Right. Yeah, because our deer have no fear of the machines, but as soon as we leave that machine, we become another entity in their area, their environment, which they know. And so therefore, in their mind, they're going, okay, there's something over there and there's something over there. We need to avoid those two places. So if you have a tight area where you're hunting and it's hard to get in there, a hunter can actually train the deer in that area with a four-wheeler, a lawnmower, even walking, two people walking in together, one walking out. They don't know if you're side by side and one stays and one leaves, but you have to train them to get them used to it.
Hi, this is Adam Lewis with DeerIQ.com, and this is your high IQ moment. Ever wonder why your hunts are not productive? Well, I believe the third reason is hunters tend to go with their gut or feelings about when and where to hunt. Now, this is a tough one because many people equate this to experience, so one has to be critical of this. However, as humans, we're prone to being influenced by our emotions, and this is not what we want to do. Try leaning more into intel you gathered by scouting instead of feelings or your gut. Intel doesn't lie, but fickle emotions many times do. If you don't know what to do, that means you need to get more intel by scouting so you can make a better fact-based decision on where and when to hunt. Check out the full article with all 4 things that are killing your hunt productivity, linked below, along with our free Deer IQ journal to help you become a greater deer hunter. And do you know your Deer IQ? If you haven't taken our Deer IQ test, you want to do that. It's linked below. Trust me, it's fun. Share it with a buddy and compare and see who has a higher IQ. And now let's get back to the podcast.
Walking out, they don't know if you're side by side and one stays and one leaves, but you have to train them to get them used to it. Our deer are used to the four-wheelers. They're not a threat to them. The noise is the same. Now, if I change four-wheelers and make a different noise, the whole ball game starts over. They memorize sounds. They memorize sights. They memorize distances of those things. So those are the things hunters have to be aware of and be concerned about and consistent with in order to be more successful in the woods.
Yeah, so if we're educating deer more than figuring them out a lot of times, then flipping that script kind of, well, okay, I'm going to educate deer when I go in the woods. Maybe go into a little more of that. Like, how can we use that then? Say, okay, they're going to know I'm coming or in there for the most part. What should I do then to habituate them, to train them in ways that will be helpful? You mentioned a little bit there, but can you go into more detail? Like, okay, what should I do? Let's say I have private property. I have a hard time getting into a certain spot to hunt it because, hey, deer know when I'm coming. They figured it out. So what would you suggest people do knowing this about deer to just, I guess, kind of train them instead of the other way around?
But there's where you're right. Deer are very easily trainable. But so those hunters that have the ability to get to their property and get on their property consistently, whether that's once a week, once every other week, multiple times a week, the more the better, in a sense. Understand sanctuaries, there's a good reason for sanctuaries where they can get in and have safety, but at the same time, your entire property should be able to become a sanctuary if you can teach the deer that your four-wheeler or you walking is not a threat. Once you no longer become a threat to them, they're not going to leave the area. They're not going to carry you in there, but you have to stay consistent with what you do. Follow the same path, follow it the same direction, follow it the same time of day, whether it's morning, evening, or both. Whatever you do in there, it has to become very consistent and the same all the time. And when that becomes consistent over time, the deer look and go, oh yeah, I know what they're doing. I know where they're going. I know what that sound is. We go around our perimeter at least twice a day with the four-wheeler and the shepherd. We literally now have wild deer bedding within 10, 12 feet of the path, and they don't even get up out of their bed. The dog even looks at them, but they know the dog's not going to leave the path. It's been trained to follow this path. It's been trained to stay in front of the machine. They know the sound of our machine. We are no threat to them whatsoever. So when I go out to go hunting, I take the same machine. I make the same noise. It doesn't have the dog, but I just go, and when I turn it off, I go up into my tree stand. That sound and that machine sitting there is no threat to those deer, and they simply come out into the feeding areas in the evenings or mornings and think nothing of it. And hunters can do the same thing with their properties and training their deer.
Yeah, that's a interesting tactic, and something that I think a lot of guys don't even consider. And just to back up a little bit, I guess, is a question I should have asked before all this, before you start going into all these different tactics, is, how long, from your observation, like how long does it take deer to wise up and change their behaviors once they know they're being hunted? Like once a hunter intrudes into that space, like how much time do they have, I guess, before the deer change?
If they haven't been in that area and it's new and the deer realize there's something abnormal there, they're going to change immediately. Now, the younger the deer is, the quicker it will come back to normalcy. So if we're looking at, like you and I, we hunt trophy bucks. We want to hunt the mature bucks. If you get them uptight or get into their area and haven't really either snuck in without being seen, which is very hard to do, or train them that you're in that area but you're not a threat, they're going to leave that area and probably not come back for quite a while. A mature buck always has 2 or 3 what I call favorite bedding areas, favorite living spots. We call them living rooms, okay? Here on the farm or on the ranches, because they can be very small areas, but they have a food source, they have a water source, and they always have a couple escape routes out of those areas. Even on the farm, the breeder bucks have 2 or 3 favorite bedding areas based on the weather and the time of day. And wild deer are exactly the same way. And those bucks will move, but they'll use those areas. Those are the areas that you either have to get them used to you going by or in and out, or you have to somehow get in there undetected where they just don't know you exist.
Yeah, that's a good way to break it down. And probably the easier one, if you have control, is just to get them used to you, I would think.
I have hunters tell me all the time, I don't go on my property. I don't want to disturb the deer. When deer season comes, then I sneak out. Most guys don't have the vast amount of property to be able to do that. You're actually go the other way. Spend time out on your property. Let those deer get used to seeing you. Let them get comfortable with you, and then they won't blow out as far, and they're quicker to come back to that area. So a lot of hunters are actually working it against their benefit by staying out, and then when they go in, they surprise those deer we want to hunt, and they're unsure about coming back because they don't know when you've left or if you've left. So you're putting them on high alert by catching them off guard. Whereas if you intermingle with them all year long on a non-threatening basis, now when you go in to go hunt, they stay much calmer and they'll have a feeling of wanting to be around that area more because you haven't been a threat all year long.
Let's talk real quick as we kind of wrap up this episode. I think it'll go well into the next one. We're going to get into more mature bucks specifically, but talk about age class, Doug, and I guess the needs and motivations and the differences between ages of deer. We've discussed this before, just how you compare that to humans, and just understanding some of this, I think, is very beneficial to how we approach things.
The personalities of deer are extremely similar to those of us humans. I always tell people when I do seminars that what we go as a person goes through in 70 years, a deer will go through those same changes and psychological aspects in 7 years. So if you look at a child from 0 to 10 years old and how they don't understand their dangers and how you have to watch over them, and yet they start to go out in the environment, that's a year-old deer. That's a year-and-a-half-old buck. Curious about everything, has a few alerts on things, but for the most part is just wide open. I'm going to go check everything out. I'm going to chase every girl I can. I don't know why I'm doing it, but it's a cool thing. Okay, I think that's danger. I smell it, but I forgot about that. And I come back out a half hour later or 15 minutes later because I don't equate it. Whereas you go to 2.5-year-old, now that's that 11 to 20-year-old. They think they've got life figured out. They do have some things figured out. They're a little more alert of, yeah, I can't cross that road because I'm probably going to get hit by a car because it's really busy. There's a little more hesitation or a little more caution in that age. And when you get to 3.5, to me, that's really the prime, what I call the start of the prime ages, 3, 4, 5. And if you look at a person, if we can make it to our 30s, we've been through a lot of scares. We've been through a lot of close calls. And so we really do start to think and analyze and have more patience. And that 3, 4, and 5-year-old buck, they have all the patience in the world. You got to remember, they don't wear watches. They're at home wherever they're at in their environment. We're the ones coming into their world. And we always seem to be impatient. We always seem to be short on time. And so if you can look at what people are in those stages, you can really start to understand what those deer are and how they act. And you can actually age them by how they act and what they're doing and interacting with other deer.
Yeah, so that as a buck gets older, 4, 5, 6, if they can make it that long, they're kind of getting a little old man, type stuff. And it, I guess, would explain why they just don't seem to move around as much. They aren't as visible as much because they're just being more efficient with their movements. They're not going to be running around like a teenager, basically, right?
They're not. We've had a number of 5, 6-year-old, 7-year-old bucks on this farm over the years. And when they get to that age and you compare it to a 60 and 70-year-old guy, they're happy to wake up. They definitely enjoy their food. They sit back and they watch all the younger ones running crazy and going, yeah, I remember I used to do that. It's not worth it anymore. I really don't want to fight if I don't have to. If I can get into the breeding cycle a little bit, great. If I can't, it's not the end of the world. I just want to enjoy life, and I like my little spot that I call home. And deer are the same way. And so if you get those older bucks and find that little comfortable home spot and can hunt those edges until he kind of comes to those edges, that's when you're going to be more successful with those deer.
Yeah, good stuff, Doug. Well, we'll kind of wrap up this episode there. There's a lot more to talk about. We'll get into mature bucks specifically here next. But Doug, thanks for sharing that. And also, the next episode, Doug took our Deer IQ test. We'll reveal his score. and that's something everybody can take online. So Doug, thanks again. We'll chat here in a little bit.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
So as we wrap up, here are some key high IQ takeaways and challenges. First, think about how you're potentially training deer negatively and what you can do to possibly flip this around and get them used to your presence. I admit this is a tough one and probably mostly for private land, but think outside the box here and maybe comment with your thoughts on this, or if you have a particular public land application. Second, if you have a stand or blind location deer seem to avoid, consider the generational learning possibility involved and how you can change this up to get back in the game. And third, if you're getting value out of this, consider being a Patreon and financially supporting Deer IQ so we can continue to bring great content. All the links are below. And I'll see you on the next episode where I'm joined by Doug for part 2, specific moves for mature bucks, and we'll reveal Doug's Deer IQ test score. You won't want to miss that, and I'll see you then.